right, let me check in on a very particular chapter of Anthony Trollope's an autobiography, which is chapter 12 on novels and the art of writing them, where he kind of goes through his things for novels, his thoughts on the novel and how you should write them. He actually, Trollope apparently actually thought, oh, maybe should write a book about the novel. Starting with sort of Robinson Crusoe as like sort of maybe the earliest of a truly popular novel. It actually, breaking the waves, as it would said, and he soon discovered that, like, oh god, that would take way too much reading. It would be a cool book to read, but would be just terrible to actually write. So he put that aside, but he did want to actually talk about it, kind of trying to kind of intended kind of vindication, because even in his day, Victorian, the height of Victorian novels, it was still kind of looked down upon as sort of something that, like, he at least can remember, like a generation back, his age back, that, like, people would hide the novels that they were reading. Young women weren't supposed to read novels, and saying that, like, hey, now everyone actually is reading novels. Everyone is. It is the first of the kind of the mass media. The printing press. It's the kind of the first of the kind of mass media sort of thing. He talks about how the teaching of novels, and what he means by the teaching of novels is not like how to write novels, but the teaching of novels, saying that, like, novels actually are there to impart moral lessons, that they're teaching them, like, real lessons. And he says, like, look, this doesn't mean that everybody in a novel is a saint. Far from it. A lot of that is the effect that he himself probably hopes to affect is that by showing the effects of ill behavior, of not being a good, honest person, of overweening passions and stuff like that, is to get the reader to be going, like, no, not this. Young woman, no, not this, not this. Saying, like, he can remember in his time that, like, young women shouldn't be reading about, reading novels about love and stuff like that. But it's like, well, actually, no, a really good novel is somewhere where you can actually impart stuff. So there is very much the moralistic side to Trollope and Victorian literature, though. Him saying, like, this isn't me writing cardboard cutouts. No, this is me actually trying to create genuine people, and not, like, sort of set them a lesson, a didactic novel, but really show some of these moral struggles and see how they play out, and the effects that they can have. And he's making, like, this is a good novelist versus, like, maybe not so good. So he maybe acknowledges that there's some people out there that would still be considered pernicious, and I mean, I guess that can change. He talks about there's a big division at the moment between sensationalist and anti-sensationalist, or realist, and he would classify himself as a realist. But saying, like, those distinctions are a bit of a mistake, because even in the most realist novel, there are moments of heightened sensationalism for effect. Like, that a really good novelist will use those techniques of kind of a bit of melodrama to heighten things, to pump things up, to drive the realism, and it's like, a great novelist will ground their sensationalist moments in things of, these are real characters in a real world. So then when something really striking happens, it has all the more power, versus maybe a crappy sensationalist novel where you get just bursts of kind of like dramatic scenes, and then cardboard wooden cutouts, and then bursts again. And it's like, that's just a crappy novel, he said. Saying, like, him and Wilkie Collins have more in common than you might think, and stuff like that. Now he's got his advice to writers of fiction, and his big thing is, it's not that you have to tell a story, but that you have a story to tell. That's the big thing, the big distinction. And oftentimes he notes that writers with their first novel, they'll have they have this burning impulse to do this and they get it, but when they get to the second novel, it's like, oh, I have to find something to actually write about now. There's the obligation. And this can happen to a writer at the beginning of the career for like the second novel, or it can happen later on. I mean, and he says, like, I hope that if I ever get to that point where I just don't have a story to tell, I'll put down the pen, though, people may snipe at me for saying, well, you've written a whole bunch of stories, Anthony. Maybe you're already done. Now, for plot and character, he says, like, he never troubled about the construction of plots, which, people might make a note in some of his novels, but his big thing was to make characters so intimate of the characters of the novel that they're living, moving, speaking, breathing human creatures that that the writer must love or hate them, but he must know them kind of deeply, and be able to kind of replicate that on the page. Now, when he talks about, he dips into like style and language, and it's definitely a different era, because I mean, when he talks about being a popular author, in some ways it's almost like, these are commercial authors, Dickens or Trollope or Thackeray. I don't know about Thackeray because I haven't read any Thackeray, but they're commercial authors. And Trollope says, like, it's incumbent on an author to write pleasantly, for everything to be, for the words to just like be really, really kind of chime with the reader, to that they should be like, intelligible without trouble. That is a bit of a clear pane of glass sort of thing we're getting there. And he talks about like harmony and rhythm, and it should have that pleasant kind of harmonious, not be a rough experience, must be difficult. And there's kind of a rhythm of speech, and it's the oration thing of like, you get those rhythms and you get that stuff, and it chimes. And he says that's one of those things that you just end up learning as an author of like, how that kind of gets to the how that chimes with the reader, which is like, oh, okay, this is much different than maybe what some writers today would see about, like, difficulties, like, oh no, they have to come and work for me and I'll get greater effects. It's like, this is very much, no, we're coming to the reader, we want to encompass as many readers as possible, we don't want to give them the difficulty, but I mean, and Trollope is somebody who is all about character, so that is in further kind of, he wants an immersive experience, which is not necessarily what all writers do want. He talks about proportions, which is a lot of times for stuff like this, you are, as a writer at this point, it's not like, oh, you can just write whatever length as possible you want. You're commissioned to a certain length. And I mean, he says, like, at this point, when he was writing this, it's like long novels are the only way you're going to be successful. Now, by the time this was actually published, it seemed like you were getting a lot of shorter novels, and maybe that was becoming more of the thing. Definitely, the triple, quadruple deckers were starting to fall out of favor, and indeed had fallen out of favor later on. And now we're back to big thumpers again. So you probably have to write to big, but it's saying, like, you as an author, you fit your story to the canvas, but you don't fill it with like lots of digressions. And he sort of likens that to like you're painting a picture, but suddenly, like, over in one corner you paint an entirely different picture in the corner of the painting that jars. I mean, there's people that that's all they are, is just little segments. But him saying, like, for the kind of story that he is writing, it's like, I wouldn't just suddenly go off and do something. Now he does cite, and yes, for all these things there are the exceptions, and he does mention Cervantes, who is definitely somebody who plopped down boom, stories all over the place, but that's got a little bit more of a picaresque feel to it versus his thing. He does actually make the point of, like, dialogue is one of the places where this can really get away on an author, because not just telling another story, but stopping and suddenly having a big long philosophical digression, two people talking about philosophy or something like that. It's like you have to look for stuff that's like, is this putting the plot forward? Is this just completely off topic? Are you going to bore your reader? We'll get to that. We'll get to that later. And he does make the thing of like, you know, for dialogue, it's like, look, gigantically long speeches are, especially I guess if you're in a realist mode, don't make any sense. People do not speak that way, except, you know, on YouTube where they talk for 10 minutes straight to the camera. But it's like dialogue is even in this is him saying at this point Victorian English, all these people you imagine declaiming. It's like, no, people have short fragmentary speech, you know, little conversations with each other. It's just like a couple of words. It's you have to actually build up an excuse. Like there's an occasion where somebody's giving a speech where there would be anything longer than that. Now he says you have to balance that, because even the most educated people speak in a very kind of ungrammatic, fragmented, kind of what would seem incoherent if you weren't in the room at the time conversation. And so you have to kind of balance that with, you don't want to be inharmonious, you don't want to be rough with the reader, you want to have them in, so you probably smooth that out a bit. It's not completely real, it's the illusion of reality. But gigantically long speeches where people just go on, hello Brian, hello Derek, and then one of them just talks for 10 minutes straight. That does not happen in real life. So you have to kind of, but it's, you know, it's doing that balance. At the end here, he does make a point of like, and they have to actually talk like they would talk, which is going to necessitate, as a novelist, that you have observed like a lot of human behavior, and have that on tap of like, I know how this character would speak from this particular class, from this particular gender, from this particular you know, age. You know, you've got to have that on tap to really be a successful novelist. And although, you know, you get plenty of novelists who you read their work and it's like everyone talks exactly the same, it's one voice, which is a flaw. But, you know, to be a truly successful novelist, you would actually have to have people that sounded different within your novel. And finally, he finishes up with the thing of beware of tedium. Don't be boring. And, you know, says that the best way to do that, you know, other than, you know, avoiding some of the things that he said before, I know no guard against this so likely to be effective as the feeling of the writer himself. When once the sense that the thing is becoming long has grown upon him, he may be sure that it will grow upon his readers. I see the smile of someone who will declare to themselves that the words of a writer will never be tedious to himself. Of the writer of whom this may truly be said, it may be said with equal truth that he will always be tedious to his readers. So yeah, if you think, wow, this is going on forever as you're writing it, it's going to feel that way to the reader, and that you need to cut or, you know, figure out a way of doing this in a more expedited fashion, or skip it altogether. So yeah, that is Trollope. That is Trollope on novels and the art of writing them. And he's going to go on English novelists of the present day, which I don't think he's throwing dirt. I think he's just going to talk about the really great ones. Actually, what is it said? In this chapter, I will venture to name a few successful novelists of my own time with whose work I am acquainted, and will endeavor to point whence their successes come and why they have failed when there has been failure. So I guess, you know, he's going to try and be honest. And I mean, I guess he knows he's writing this posthumously. So there is that. All right. I will leave it there. More videos later.